everybody, Opinionated Cheapskate. This video, you and I are going to figure out together whether it's possible to get an adequate, relatively small car camping tent for less than $50. This is the Amazon Basics, supposedly four-person tent. It is sold for somewhere in the, $30, $40, $50 is sort of what the prices you see. You see it in the high 30s, mid 40s, and sometimes up into the 50s, at least at the time of filming. The design of this is very similar to an existing design that Coleman sells, such that it would not surprise me at all that this is in fact a Coleman tent, which has been slightly redesigned and rebranded as the Amazon Basics tent. I'm sure Amazon doesn't spend a lot of time designing new tents. They have other things to be doing. So this is a rebranded tent from somebody, and my guess it's probably from Coleman. Design is very simple. You have two very long fiberglass poles which cross over the top, and then there is this small fiberglass ridge pole which crosses over here to stretch out the rain fly. So here, let me just sort of show the structure of this from underneath. You can see how this it goes together with sleeves, and then you sort of tie everything together up here at the top of the thing, and the idea is that all holds it together. Another important part about the design of this tent is actually these guy outlines. And I read a number of reviews about this tent, and they say, hey, this tent doesn't breathe very well. The real question is whether this is, did they set this thing up correctly? Because if you don't tie out these guy lines correctly, like this, you're not going to have a very big gap right here between the gray and the orange part. And that gap is critical to getting enough fresh air into this tent and allowing it to breathe. And so for this thing to have sort of any hope of not turning into a sort of a clammy oven, it doesn't have an enormous amount of mesh to begin with. You really have to make sure that the mesh that it does have works, and that's really on both of these sides right here. Now, because the poles of this tent are fiberglass, which means they're a little bit fragile, they're not ready to take really heavy wind loads, and because the stakes that this comes with are frankly garbage, this is really not designed to be a rough heavy weather tent. It's really sort of a fair weather tent, but even a fair weather tent needs to be able to handle some rain without soaking you. And so that's what we're going to try here. This is set up today. It's a very nice day, but tomorrow's not going to be so nice, and particularly tomorrow evening we're supposed to get a lot of rain, thunderstorms, and so forth here. And so I've got this thing all set up, all guyed out, ready to go, and I will spend a night in it in the rain, and we will see whether I make it through the night or whether I end up bailing out on this baby and going back to my warm, comfortable bed at some point, because I'm getting dripped on. So like any piece of camping gear, you really want to try it out before you have to rely on it. And I would say that is particularly true of something that I paid less than $50 for. So we'll see how it goes. Let me just now show you the inside. That's the only other part of this I haven't really talked about. So you get, I think the way they want you to set this up is not the way I have it set up, but rather, along this long side here, you would run your head sort of up against the door. And that would be the way you would theoretically get 4 people in this, but you're not going to get 4 people in this. That's ridiculous. This is for reference, okay, this is a big air mattress. It's a car camping tent. It's too heavy to go backpacking, so I have to set this up with the plush luxury pad I've got, and that's basically the exact same size as a single bed. And that's how much it takes up, which is pretty much half the tent, maybe a little bit less. There's room for another whole sleeping bag here, so you could put 2 of these in here with no trouble. After 2, however, you are in a little bit of trouble. You could not run these the other way along. So unless you are, you're talking about very small people or children, you're not getting 4 people in this tent. The design, again, is very simple, very basic, but maybe it'll be good enough to do the job. We are about to find out. So apparently I didn't have to wait until tomorrow night. This morning when I got up early, it was already raining. It's been raining all day. It's now late in the afternoon. It's been a very steady, heavy rain, almost no winds. We haven't had any wind-blown rain here, but this is giving, frankly, a pretty good test of this because it's been in heavy rain now for, I don't know, probably at least the last 8 or 10 hours. With almost no let up. A lot of it about as far as it's coming out right now. You'll see down here a little bit of puddle forming there. It may be my fault for not tightening that quite enough. I'm going to try to readjust it and see if I can get it flat. Same thing over here. You can see a little bit of puddling right here. Let's just sort of see where we are. And this side looks much better. Looks like it's all running off and there's no puddling, so that may just be something I got to tighten up. So now as for the protection on the door, this is actually looking pretty good. As you can see, in a straight down rain, pretty much where that tie out where you tie the door up and below is wet, but it's essentially perfectly dry above. So despite the fact that it's been really completely pouring all morning, there would be really no reason why you couldn't have this this window up. I buttoned this up just to make sure because I didn't know exactly what kind of wind we were going to get. But the combination of the awning over this and the fact that it sticks out to a degree means that at least in a sort of a straight down rain, you have no reason to have to button that up, so you should be able to get pretty good ventilation even in the rain. All right, so I'm going to do some readjusting of this, and I'm going to tune back inside where I give it an inspection from the inside and sort of see how we're doing. All right, so here's the interior report, which is, I guess, overall not perfect, but not really too bad given the price point of this tent. We've had two what I would call fairly minor and relatively easily fixable failures here, both at the corners where basically where the seam for this sort of plastic, almost tarp material on the floor and the tent material meet. Now in a better quality tent, what you would have is essentially what's called a bathtub floor, where this part that you can see here would run up the sides a bit and the seam would be up here, so that no matter how much water occurred down here, you wouldn't have that problem. But of course that's a little more complicated to make and a little more expensive, and this is a very cheap tent, so it doesn't have that. So instead what you have is a seam right here at the bottom, and that seam is not perfect. Here in the corner it has clearly, the seam tape has clearly failed, and it's allowing a relatively small amount of water. Given how much rain we've had over the last 8 hours or so, not a huge amount of water in here. Certainly this is not enough that it would ruin your trip. Over here you have an even smaller leak in this corner. This is literally, like, you can see it right there. 2 drops of water, 3 drops of water again. Hardly the kind of thing that's going to ruin your trip. And this is easily fixable. So what's going to happen is I'm going to take this, and after all the rain finishes up and this dries off, I'm going to know where both of these issues are, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to treat it with a little waterproofing, and that should address even these small leaks. Now, we're only 8 hours in. We're going to have a very good test here because I think it's going to rain all the rest of today and into the evening as well. Depending on how things go here, I may or may not sleep in this. It may turn out that we have a more significant failure down the road, but for right now, I would say overall this tent is holding up. It's doing better than I expected it to do given the price point, and we will just have to see how it goes. Hey everybody, P&A Cheapskate. We are now a day after the rain. We've had a nice dry morning here. We get some more showers this afternoon, but fortunately the tent's had a good chance to dry out here, and I can shoot a few concluding thoughts on this tent now that I spent a night in it, and it's ridden out quite a vigorous rainstorm. All right, the first thing is actually right here. We didn't have any more significant water infiltration beyond what I already had from the last clip, and I think here's one of the reasons why. I figured out that one of the ways the water was probably getting in here, oh, hello Mr. B, whatever you are, was this black webbing right here. this stuff is not waterproof, and it's sewn right into the fabric of the tent. And I had this sort of pitched over without this little Velcro attached. And I think what was happening is the water was running down, and a lot of it was running right against this, soaking it, and then that water was soaking through and getting into the tent. Because on 2 of the corners, that was where the problem was, right there. And so I think it's important if you're setting this up, particularly if you're going to have bad weather. It doesn't look like this is actually an important part of the tent, but apparently it is. You should definitely Velcro this down, and then you should straighten this out so that this little thing, you see how it looks kind of like almost like a little cup? That's actually, I think, a rain gutter, and it's meant to throw the water away from that webbing so that it doesn't get completely soaked. Now, you know, that'll work reasonably well if the rain's coming straight down. I'm not sure it's going to do so much for you if, you know, that section of the tent is largely underwater in a puddle, or you get driving rain against the side of it. So I'm still going to soak that thing down with some waterproofing spray to make sure that even if that black webbing gets wet, it's not going to be, you know, a significant source of water getting into the tent. But, you know, hey, part of that is on me. This is why you test this. You learn things. So, so my overall impressions. Should you buy this tent? Yeah, I think I give it a qualified thumbs up. I will say 2 things about it. One, you know, because it's a fiberglass pole tent, it's not going to handle wind particularly great. Also over here, as you see, you know, you've got rain protection, you know, up here, and that worked great as long as the rain was coming straight down. But your rain protection, that little orange flap, ends right there. So if you're getting essentially heavy wind-driven rain coming right at the side of the door, you're almost certainly going to get a little infiltration through the zipper. Last night when I was looking at this, you could actually see light coming through the little holes left by the zipper, and those holes were definitely big enough for water to get through. So, you know, I don't think it would be a catastrophic failure, but if you get a lot of wind-driven rain against this door, you're definitely going to see a little bit of water in the tent. And so, in addition to sort of setting it up, you know, paying attention to those little gutter things in the corners, I would also try to put this side of the tent in whatever direction you think the rain is least likely to be driven. Because the other 3 sides of the tent, I think, will handle wind-driven rain a lot better than the side with the door in it. The last thing, you know, and I did another video on this about, you know, crummy tent stakes versus good tent stakes. This tent, of course, comes with appallingly bad tent stakes because it's so cheap. And so I would say, if you're going to go ahead and buy this tent, budget into your purchase price, and this probably is going to be true for almost any tent in this price range. You're going to need to buy new stakes for it, and you should just go ahead and buy them before you even, you know, set the tent up. Don't wait to have a, you know, a catastrophic failure because the tent blows away because it's not properly anchored into the ground. I like MSR groundhog stakes, and I use 4 of them at the guy out points here. And because this is just in my backyard, I use the tent stakes that it came with, the 5 around the corners. But I would certainly replace all 9 of these with better stakes before I actually had to depend on this as a form of shelter in a place where I couldn't immediately bail out and go back into my house if I had problems. So, you know, a few issues with this tent. It's not perfect, but for the price, it's actually a pretty good value. It performed better than I expected it to. So I give it a qualified thumbs up. Hopefully that's helpful to all of you. Have a good afternoon. Thanks, everyone.